All right, so if you want to follow along with slides, I posted slides on Twitter. I tweeted at SAINTCON. I'll post more slides. This is a training that me and Gronin put together for a different conference. And so you're getting the first 4 hours. The other 4 hours are about Empire. So you can go through that stuff too if you want. But this stuff's kind of like the basic pen testing stuff. So if you're an experienced pen tester, there's really nothing new in here. So I mean, if you got other cool things to look at or go to, this is a really introductory course focused on beginners. So if you have advanced pen testing skills, you're probably going to be really bored. So I'm just letting you know now. So if you want to make a different decision on where you're at, please do so. So everybody good? Everyone feeling good? Cool. Again, blah, I'm not responsible for anything dumb you do. You learn this stuff at your own risk. If you use this to do something illegal, installing malware or something without someone's permission on someone else's software is illegal. That's what we're going to talk about doing. But we're doing it to systems we own instead of systems we don't own. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, so I can't answer any questions about legal stuff. Basically, I'm just kind of assuming you have some basic understanding of Linux and Windows commands. I'm not going to go into too much depth with a lot of this stuff. We're just going to be playing around with Netcat, Metasploit, and doing some backdooring stuff with Backdoor Factory and talking about some web shells and things like that. So it's a very easy, broad overview. A lot of this stuff is easily detectable. We're going to fight with Windows Defender because we're going to turn it off and then somehow it's going to get turned back on. A lot of this stuff used to work really well, but eventually the antivirus has figured out how to detect the techniques, and the guy that was doing the Backdoor Factory decided, I've got more important things to do. He's like, I could rewrite it to bypass AV again and keep going back and forth, but he just decided that his time was better spent somewhere else. So, cool. Again, like I said, this does not teach you how to be stealthy. We're just going to go over how to be dangerous. So for the VMs for the class, the password's root. The default password is going to be SAINTCON 2018 on both images. All lowercase. I should have done it uppercase so it would match the Wi-Fi password. Before we start up the VMs, I'm just going to go over my setup. You want to make sure that you're not bridging, especially the Windows VM on the wireless network, just so, because we're going to be putting like Netcat and other stuff in it, and so your neighbor could come in and try and connect to your system if the wireless network allows peer connections and do stuff. Oh yeah. All of these slides are on Google Slide Deck. So if you go to Twitter, Nemus 801 on Twitter, you can get the slides there. All right, so we're going to go over the setup of the VMs first. Basically, we're going to go into VirtualBox, manage the file. We're going to set up a host network manager, then click and create a DHCP server for that network. So we're going to create kind of an internal network to play around with. It's not going to be accessible to the internet. Like I said, we don't want to bridge the guest VMs over because of the vulnerabilities we're going to be playing with, but we do want to have the Kali box to have internet access, and so we can download stuff. So kind of here's my setup in host network manager. Does anyone want me to like walk through this? You guys get this, or do you want more detail on how to set up VirtualBox? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. I'm using the I've just got multiple networks here. Basically, I'm just creating my own isolated environment for these two virtual machines, and then I'm going to assign the host adapters to that isolated network. And if I want the networking interface to get an IP address automatically through DHCP, I have to tell VirtualBox to do DHCP requests on that, so I don't have to go through and configure all my IP addresses. This saves a little bit of time there. Does that make sense? Okay. Actually, you know what? I will just go through this. So if I go over here to Host Network Manager, this is where all my networks are. By default, you're going to need to probably create a network and then assign it, basically just assign a DHCP network to it. Then in here, on the settings, if it loads, maybe it won't. We're going to add for my Windows box, under networking, I only have one adapter. I have it as a host-only adapter. We can go through here and add it to an internal network or a NATed network. And then I'm going to tell it which network to go to, host-only Ethernet adapter 4. And then if I look here on my host management network, I know that the 4 is going to be on the 192.168.56.1 network. I just need to make sure that both machines are on the same network, on the same host-only Ethernet adapter. So with these, with my Kali box, I've got the first adapter is just going to be NATed to my wireless interface. And the second adapter is I'm adding so it can communicate with the Windows box, so it's in an isolated environment. So I have two adapters here. And if I didn't set the DHCP, again, if I didn't set the DHCP on the networking host, then when the machines came up, I'd have to go through and manually set the IP addresses. So yeah, I'm setting it to 4 on the second machine. So, I mean, that's basically the setup. So at this point, what the scenario that I'm kind of focusing this training on is, let's say your friend, your coworker, somebody leaves their computer unattended. How fast can I do something? How fast can I get a backdoor on there? What's the best way to do this? And like, how could I do this if I didn't have anything available to me? Like what would I need to set up beforehand to be able to kind of do stuff? So we're going to kind of go through the different scenarios where we can basically put something on someone's computer by just typing a bunch of stuff. And this kind of came from me because people, you know, when I started out doing this stuff, people were like, oh, if you touch my computer, you're going to break it, you're going to hack it. And I was like, if people already think I have that power, maybe I should just figure out how to do it, right? If they're already afraid of me, might as well give them a reason to be, right? So, I mean, the old, you know, how this starts out is someone leaves their computer unlocked, and of course you, David Hasselhoff them. Lean actually did this to me. This is a picture that Lean put. I've kept the screenshot forever. But yeah, I left my computer unlocked, and Kevin came by, and David Hasselhoff me. I'm like, oh, great. I'm like, how can I take this one step further for when he forgets? Because I know that's going to happen. Anyway, yeah, memes, funny. So yeah, I don't always leave my computer unlocked, but when I do, my Slack says gay turtle and resnick. All right. So the first scenario, the first lab we're going to do is we're just going to go through and set up Netcat listener. Netcat's kind of like the hello world of backdooring. It's kind of the easiest tool to use and set up. But the problem is it's really easy to learn on, start with, but it doesn't give you a lot of advanced features, and it's actually kind of hard to manage long term. So one thing we need to be aware of, like when we're setting up our backdoors, we are either going to dial back on the machine to our CNC machine, or we're going to dial into that machine. So that each one of these kind of has their own scenario. So if the machine's on the network and we're on the same subnet, or we have access to it and there's no firewall between it, we can set up a listener on that machine and connect to it. If it's behind a firewall, usually we want to have the listener dial back into our CNC machine And so what would be and that's usually the better option, and why is that? Well, the reason is people put a lot of rules on their inbound firewall to prevent things from coming in. People are really lax on what they let out, right? So if you can configure your backdoor to run on port 443, port 53, and make it look like DNS traffic, make it look like web traffic, make it look like something that's already happening. You can even, there's stuff out there where they've written backdoors where they basically just transport all the communication through Dropbox or something like that. So, when they try to get to layer 7 inspection, it gets harder and harder because they're going to bury themselves deeper and deeper into normal user traffic. But for this class, we're basically just going to be talking about connecting to ports and dialing back, and we're not going to get into the very specific protocol hiding stuff. When it comes to hacking and offensive computing, there's really only 3 things you can do, right? There's 3 goals of a hacker. I'm either going to compromise a system, which is, ideally that's what everyone wants to do. They want to own the system. They want to control it, right? We want that remote code execution vulnerability. If we can't get that, then we're always looking for data leakage. Like, what data can we glean off of systems? What can we steal? Like, Heartbleed was bad, not because it was a remote code execution vulnerability, but it was bad because it was a data leakage vulnerability that allowed you to get access to other systems. Like, you could pull memory. The Heartbleed vulnerability allowed you to pull memory off of the web server, so if someone was logged in with their credentials, you could get their session data, their cookies, and you could use it for further data. You could use that to further penetrate systems, and I still know people that have accounts that they pulled off random websites from that vulnerability because they pulled all the data out of the web server. And then finally, the last straw of a hacker is always the denial of service. So the denial of services can be damaging, but they're not as fun, right? Because you're basically just stopping someone from using something. And basically, when you're talking about hacking, those are the 3 things that you can do. For the prep work for Netcat, it's not full featured, and you'll want more capability. So Netcat is basically just going to get you command shell. And if you're going to do anything with Windows command shell, you kind of need to have wget or some kind of file editor or some way of controlling the system afterwards. So Netcat just gets you into the system. It doesn't give you a full featured command and control system like Metasploit will, which we'll play with later. For this lab, I'm just setting up a local web server on my box. So in this scenario, if you wanted to have a Netcat backdoor, you set up your web server when you have your Netcat exe and all your packages, and then you would want to put in maybe like a Windows install script on that web server. And so that way, when you're attacking someone and someone leaves their computer unlocked, you basically go to the website, download the script, execute the script, and walk away. At that point, you've set up a very quick, easy compromise on the system and kind of giving yourself that way of bringing a system, getting access to a system and not having to be physically there other than maybe a minute or 2. And that's how you would kind of do a Netcat backdoor, where you set up a stuff. But the problem is this is very easy to detect as well. So additionally, with the Netcat backdoor, any executable that you download needs to be portable, so it shouldn't have any installation dependencies. It shouldn't have any operating system dependencies other than what's already previously installed, so you make sure you test whatever you're using. So you don't want to install stuff on the software because that's a dead giveaway. So basically with this, I'm just using gvim, which is portable wget, and Netcat, so that I can get access to the operating system. So this is the hello world command of backdoors in Netcat. If you run this executable on your Windows machine, it's going to set Netcat to listen on port 449, and then any TCP connection that comes into the system is going to execute a command prompt and return that command prompt to the TCP session. So you could connect to this using Telnet or another Netcat or whatever and execute commands on the system with whatever privileges of the user who executed the Netcat instance. This is the batch command, so this is kind of like an install script where it goes through. So you have to make sure that you enable the firewall rule, allow it to pass through, which you can do with the advanced firewall, the net sh command, and you want to allow UDP for Netcat, and then allow the Netcat system. And so usually I push Netcat to the system32 directory, just so it's off. This is just for reference. This is just a bunch of commands, Windows commands and a Linux version, just so you can do stuff once you've got your backdoor installed. Use that for reference. You want to make sure you've got Netcat in your path, your command path, so that you can execute it properly and do other stuff. Everybody understands what a path is, right? Just the folders that when you type a command in, it's going to be, these are the folders that it looks for. So this is just information for getting the Netcat. So again, here's another VB script. If you want to use a VB script to set up your backdoor, PowerShell, you can run commands like this. So however you want to set up your script to have Netcat, download Netcat, run it, and install it on your system. And so here's what it basically looks like. So I'm using Netcat from my Kali image to connect to a Windows server. Once I've connected, I can execute commands, and maybe start up Notepad, and then it'll show up Notepad on the person's system, and you can mess with them. And then I use, so here is basically, I'm just using Process Explorer so we can kind of see how this works. We see that Netcat's running in the background here. Make sure everything's working. And then TCP view to verify it. So this is another way you can kind of detect this if someone's installed Netcat, is looking through here, and it's like, oh look, someone installed Netcat. I can get rid of it and delete it. Batch commands, again, PowerShell. This will basically, if you run PowerShell with Windows style hidden, it'll run everything in the background so they don't see that, iconic. How many people have been out there, and I don't think it happens as much more, but when you see that command shell open and it's just, it's running and doing stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's a virus. Right? You see that black prompt, you're running a program, you see this black prompt come in, like, yeah, whatever is happening, I know it's not good. So you want to make sure you get rid of that, at least to try and make it not as obvious that something terrible is going on. Again, shutdown commands, sometimes when you're doing persistence, you might want to have to reboot the system to get other things that you've got installed working, stuff like that. So it's good to kind of be familiar with the shutdown command in Windows. Also, if you want to play around with the firewall, when you've got access to the machine, you want to execute commands. The best way to do this stuff is through the commands and go through the Windows APIs instead of trying to use programmatic things that might go wrong. Another way to kind of hide your backdoor on an operating system is to schedule it with an @ command. @ command processes. So if you got Netcat installed and you want it to run maybe a certain time, or someone's going through and killing it, or it's dying, you want it to restall it, you put in an @ command. The thing about @ command is you only see @ commands if you check for @ commands. How many people have checked their operating system for @ commands? Right? So you can have a command run in there and it's kind of hidden, and there's no real GUI, and there's no real way of just checking that to see if there's something weird going on. So it's kind of a place to hide stuff. I mean, you can schedule it with a task scheduler, but there's a lot more chance that someone will go in there and notice the task and be like, what is this weird task that's scheduled to run at 3 p.m. every day? Let me go ahead and delete that. So you're asking if I was, when I'm running the @ command, am I generating another @ command? I suppose you could do that. I don't see there would be a whole benefit, because if I look at my @ commands, I'm going to see 2 @ commands. Maybe if I have an @ command that creates another @ command that might not get deleted if I made it look like a system @ command. But for the most part, there should really be nothing in there in your @ commands. So, so to answer your question, I am not. But basically, with the @ commands, you can go through and just set like have it run every day, set it run at a date, and it's kind of, like I said, it's hidden from the system. Yeah. It's pretty powerful. It's fun to play with. Also, too, if you want to try and hide your tracks, you want to make sure that you. So when you get more advanced stuff, like when you write, if you're going to write custom malware, you really don't want to leave a trace. You want to leave everything removed. So one thing you can do if you want to just purge stuff from is make sure you're using sdelete or using something that does kind of a file level removal instead of just a soft delete, so someone can go back in here and see what type of whatever you're doing. Because the biggest problem with cyber weapons is it's just data, right? So once you've written this really cool, awesome script to attack someone, they get that script, they figure out how to use it, then they're going to use it back against you. So eventually you want to get to the point where you purge and you're quiet, and that's what the more professional pen testers try to do, is leave no trace. Like, they get in your system, they stay in memory, they do everything, and then they delete themselves, and there's nothing there left to investigate against. All right, so the first lab that we're going to do is just installing Netcat shell on a VM and connecting to it using Kali and using Kali and Windows. So I'll switch to VMs. Anybody have any questions so far? All good? All of this stuff makes sense? Is there anything you want to go over again? Okay. So this is another thing to be aware of the security warning. So on this machine, I was previously playing around with Netcat, and so using some of the techniques provided by Offensive Security, they say, hey, you can use Meterpreter or whatever to make a persistent backdoor. So Netcat was scheduled to boot on startup, but because it's not a verified, published, trusted binary, Windows is like, hey, do you really want to run this? And obviously, no. I mean, if I'm as the user, no, I wouldn't, right? So you want to make sure that you, on your victim's computer too, you want to make sure that you would either disable this or figure out some way to get past it. Cancel it for now. No, I cancel my VM. Is anyone able to transfer any of the VMs or get anything set up? Yeah, I ordered 64-bit USB drives, and Amazon just delivered them. So they're at my. Like, yeah, they're not coming in time. So I ran to Best Buy and got a bunch of this mini USB that they had, and they only had 32 gigs. I'm like, okay, great. Okay. So here on the VM, I have my Netcat script. You can go take a look at it with Notepad. This is a PowerShell script that I can just sit here and run. I'm gonna, I've put Windows Netcat I put Netcat in the Windows system directory. I'm gonna go ahead and run it. It should run. Yeah, if you follow through. So we'll go back to that. Oh yeah. So the question was, are the directions for the lab in the PowerPoint? Yes, but it's not step by step. So basically, if you go back through here, we can go through and look at the commands. So basically, we want to make sure that we've started Apache, because we're going to download Netcat from Apache, copy it to Windows 32, and then we'll execute the script. And so here's the commands that we're going to run, and the breakdown of the command. And then these are all the different scripts you guys can play with. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure here a little bit, but I'm going to walk through it. But that's a good point. I will add more slides where I provide like a step-by-step scenario through it, so you guys can play around with it later. Okay, so let's just verify connectivity. I'm on .3 on that machine, and on this machine. I am .4, so I'm going to ping. Yeah, I've got communication. So basically, I'm just going to verify, am I on the same network? Is it all internal? Can I ping the internet? Shouldn't be able to from this box. Good. Okay, so on Kali box. Can't ping the internet, but I was able to ping. Is that right? No. Okay, we're good there. So on this, to get internet access, I just need to DHCP my ETH0. So right now, you see my ETH0 interface does not have internet access. So I'm just going to do DHCP client ETH0. That should give me an IP address on that interface. And so I have a 215, and so now I should be able to get out to Google. Or do whatever. Yep. Okay. Let's see. Apache 2, start. So I'm going to start my web server. And then on my Windows machine, I'm going to go to the IP address. All right, that's my web server, and then I'm going to pull down Netcat. So basically, the scenario we want to play with is we just want to practice doing it manually, downloading Netcat, getting it installed, getting all the pieces in place, and then building, basically the next step beyond that is just building a script. The problem with scripts is they're great if they work, right? But if they don't work, then you've got to, you either got to finish putting it in there or finish getting deleted. And if you've got, like, let's say the time between someone's going to the bathroom on a break and coming back, so you want to practice maybe going through this step a little bit, getting your script working, getting the Netcat installed, getting it put in place, and getting it running, and then walking away with it. So we have Netcat downloaded. It's going to go into my downloads. I'm going to copy it. Go to Windows, paste it into here, and then I'm done there. And then I just delete it here. And I go in here, delete it again. So that's pretty fast, right? So I've got it installed. Next thing is just executing my script. So I can store my script on the web server. I pull my script down. I either put it in a place where I can copy and paste it and run it, or just execute the PowerShell script. Changing things. see if that ran. So, yep, that did not put Netcat in the background. Okay. So yeah, on this script, it's doing kind of the whole download. Did I change this? Sorry about your output path. So yeah, so what this script's supposed to do is just basically go through and download Netcat, move it to Windows C, and move it to the path. But because of the permissions, it's probably going to fail. So if you run it as administrator, it should go through. But let's just run this part real quick. Problem with this stuff is Windows changes things. So something that worked 4 months ago doesn't work now. Something that worked in the past, usually you kind of have to refresh this. So it's really good to kind of go through it over and over again. If you want to automate the process. Sometimes it's just easier to do it manually. Let's try this. Let's try the VB script. I think that usually works better. No Netcat still. Oh. Run as administrator. Line 17. Okay, let's try. Register. So this is the going back to the slides here, this is the register add command that I put in previously when I was testing this, that basically when it boots up, it's going to start Netcat. So I'm just going to run this manually, but if we were to go through and run these commands, to run it as administrator. Start CMD. Run as administrator. Yes. That goes through and updates it, so you have the commands all ready to go there. See if the copy command still works. Valid number of parameters. X copy. Oh yeah, I have to be in the downloads folder. That is why. But you can run that command. Basically, if you have the full pathing in there, you can have it copy over. That'll set up the reg. Then you go through and run the firewall commands. Let's try this one again. This one should work. I have something wrong. Anyway, we can go over that a little bit later. We'll just move on for right now. So I'm just going to run Netcat from a terminal to start with, and this is how I kind of recommend starting. Well, this is where we should have started. So I'm just going to go to the path where Netcat is located. Windows. Spell Windows correctly. Again, we have this Windows Defender pop-up, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about just disabling it while you're playing with it. But you can kind of see like all of these security controls and things that kind of get in your way of doing this backdooring stuff. So we have Netcat set up. We're going to say, yeah, listen on everything. I'm going to set up the listener, tell it to run command, verify that it's running. So we have procmon, so we can see the process. And we see right here, so here's our netcat command. And then let's just connect to it through, switch VMs. Kali. And so we can see there now I've got access to the Windows machine through Netcat, through a backdoor. We've kind of seen, I thought about making, I should probably make this streamlined, but I really want you guys to know all the things that can go wrong. Because that way you'll be more prepared for them. So basically the Netcat, we have a Netcat listener, I can do a dr/p, get the files, who am I. If I've got wget installed on there, which I think is in downloads. Shells are very different from terminals. Like you have tab in terminals, you have all these features built in. But when you have a really primitive shell, you lose all of that. So it can get a little bit weird when you're trying to find stuff. So if you don't know the pathing directly off the top of your head, you got to type it in. It won't tab out and do all this special stuff for you. But let's just drop wget over there, and then we could, if we wanted to, now we could download and install more stuff. Let's see this computer. So there's my wget, copy that over. I'll just dump it in here. Don't do that. Yep, now I got my wget command, so I could wget whatever. So if I have more executables I want to install, more things I want to install, I can wget them, install them, get more things installed, whatever. So that's kind of the basics of Netcat. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to play around with Metasploit and use Meterpreter. You can see that Meterpreter is a lot less awkward, but again, it's going to get hit by Windows Defender. So one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about exploits and payloads, like the vulnerability is the path. The vulnerability is how I'm going to get into your system. The exploit is how the tools or the technique that's going to allow me to leverage the vulnerability. And then the payload is what I'm going to do once I've gotten into some sort of executable path. And so these are really important terminologies when it comes to, and when I was younger, this was something that really kind of was, I felt like everyone just assumed you knew, so I always try to make sure everyone understands this, that the vulnerability is just like the path, like how am I going to get in there, and then the exploit is how technically, how am I going to leverage that path. Oh yeah, the link, oh did I only shared the one, didn't I? Let me go down, see if I can share the whole folder. That's my bad. All right. Yep, that should be there now. You able to get to it? Okay. Yeah, the question was, can I share that? I made a mistake of not sharing the whole lab. So in this module, we are going to do so with Netcat, we dialed into the system, or we connected in with our TCP connection. With Metasploit and Meterpreter, we're going to do a reverse shell and have it call back to a multi-handler and to a listener, so that we can have, once we get the executable on the machine, it'll come back and let us know that the system's been attacked or compromised. So using Metasploit, we're going to set up a multi-listener. We're going to start Msfconsole, and we're going to update the multi-sploit console using msfupdate. Oh, no, don't do that right now because it takes forever. The old way was using let's see. Yeah, don't use the console. Use msfupdate. That I remember. One or the other. Either do it or don't. I'll double check again. I remember from my notes. But anyway, we're going to set the binary payloads, and basically all we're going to do for our backdoor is we need to define what the local host it is and the port. So we're going to say, where is it going to dial back to, and what port is it going to dial back to on the machine? And then here's just some links on for more information on how to use MSF Venom. So we're going to use MSF Venom. This stuff used to work really well, but anything pretty much produced from this is going to hit off on AV. But we can use this to kind of get our feet wet and get familiar with generating a malicious binary. So in Metasploit, we're going to go through and we're going to say, I want Meterpreter shell with a reverse TCP connection. So we're going to use Meterpreter as our malware that we're going to install, and then we're going to use the reverse TCP connection setup to have it come back and dial up. So we're using MSF Venom to generate the binary on the port, and then we're creating the executable called davidhasselhoff.exe. After you create the executable, you do the file temp davidhasselhoff.exe just to make sure, yes, it is a 32 binary executable. We put our hasselhoff.exe on our web server somewhere it's accessible, and then once we want to go and access it, someone leaves their computer unlocked, we go to their computer, we go to the exe, download it, and run it. Makes things a lot easier than using all the scripts and everything that we were doing with Netcat. So for this lab to work, you have to turn off Windows Defender and make sure it stays off. Windows likes to just flip it back on, especially if you reboot or do something, change stuff. I swear I've turned this thing off a million times and somehow it finds itself back on. So anyway, we can wget our davidhasselhoff.exe or download it through the web browser or however we want to get it installed on our system. Then we're going to set up our multi-handler in Msfconsole. So we're going to use exploit multi-handler, set our payload to Windows shell reverse TCP, which is basically telling the Msfconsole to listen on a TCP port, and then we just tell it which IP address to listen to and which port. And so once we've got the binary executed, we can then see it running process monitor, process explorer here. We see it running in the background. So that's kind of way you can see, like, oh, is there something malicious? And then we see the description Apache bench command line. That's another description of maybe there's something weird going on with this binary. So when you're in the multi-handler, you can use show options. It'll show you all the parameters and everything that's available to you for that module. And then we can set exit on session false. That way we can switch between sessions and move around on the multi-handler. So that's important. So like if you have multiple shells coming back to your multi-handler, you want to set exit on session false so that when you like move between sessions or leave sessions or close it, it'll keep the multi-handler running in the background. And then you can, once you've gone back on your sessions, you can type sessions. It'll tell you all the ones you have available to you. You can do sessions-i to connect back. All right, so next lab, we are going to run Meterpreter and set up a multi-session handler. Anybody have any questions on this? Pretty easy stuff. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of here. So here is my MSF Venom command. And I'm going to generate my hasselhoff.exe. So I'm specifying the IP address of my Kali box here, the port, and then it's dumping it to the exe. Payload. So there is our David Hasselhoff.exe set up. Let's copy that over. To our directory there. So I'm going to start Msfconsole. Takes forever. It's loading all the goodness. So we go to use exploit multi-handler, set payload, Windows shell reverse TCP. And so if you want to figure out these payloads, you can kind of tab out from them. Oh, if it lets me. I might have broke it. Yeah, so it's showing me that there's 214. So like if I want to figure out what the payloads are, I could type like I want Windows, and it says here's a bunch of different types of payloads. You can go through and look at them, and then like Google them and figure out how they work if you're interested in them. If you wanted Linux stuff, and there's modules in here too. Metasploit uses the terminology kind of exploit, payload, run. But when modules, it gets a little confusing because like the nomenclature doesn't really match up to an exploit if you're running a module like the multi-handler. You're not really exploiting anything, you're just starting a listener, and you don't really have a payload because you've already delivered your payload. But by setting your payload, you're saying I'm just expecting reverse shell. So you kind of got to realize that they're just commands that are mapped to certain functionality more so than they are like directly interpreted. Okay. Use multi-handler, set payload, and then let's do the, you guys see this? Let me see if I can make this bigger. Is that easier to see? Show options. Okay. So if you do the show options, it'll basically show you all of the things you need to set to get the process working. We're going to set the L host on this to which is the local host, our IP address of 192.168.556.3 with the Kali box. And then I'm going to set the local port. So this is the port that we defined in the exploit that we wrote for the David Hasselhoff exe. We're saying, hey, dial back to 192.168.5.6.3, connect to port 77. So I'm telling the multi-handler, listen on this IP address, listen on this port. We hit run. We started our session, we started our listener. And then we can go to our Windows box. Open up the browser. David Hasselhoff. Pick an easier name to spell or enable directory transversal. course you did. Underscore Hassel. Yep, there we go. So yeah, see, I download it. As soon as I download it, Windows Defender's like, this is a virus. I'm deleting it. So we're just going to go ahead and turn that off. Turn it off. Turn it off. Let's see if it'll let us download it now. Failed again. Let's try and get it with wget. Oh. So I'm just going to delete these previous binaries. Yeah, it does. That's what I want. Operation did not complete successfully because the file contains a virus or potentially I swear I didn't update this machine. So another thing you gotta be aware of, Windows is good thing is they're always installing new stuff. I swear, because like I tried this and I didn't update it, but oh well. Let's try making a new one. Try it with a different name. It's off. Wonder if it's probably registered it. Turn off. Crazy. All right, let's try that again. Oh, this is my machine. Real-time protection. Okay, this is where we needed to go. So we go to Windows Defender Security Center. We go here, and we go to Virus Threat Protection Settings, and we want to disable real-time protection. We turn that off, then we should be able to do the magic of downloading it. Perfect. And it looks like it ran. Come on, David. Are you here? Not seeing it. Oh, perfect. Okay. Yep, it is running. So we have it running in our background there. And then let's go back to Kali. And we have our reverse shell. And now we are in Metinterpreter. So basically, we got the XE, we disabled Windows Defender. Once we disabled Windows Defender, we were able to get the reverse shell working, and now we have a backdoor in the system, and we have with Metinterpreter, we have a more powerful piece of malware to run. And with this, you can upload and download files from a system a lot easier. I think you even get tab complete. Nope. So let's say I wanted to pull down this password.txt.txt file. Let's see, what was it? Help. Download password.txt.txt. Source destination. But it does exist. Do I have to give it the full path? That's annoying. Oh, passwords. It's amazing how used you get to, being able to up command and rerun stuff or history and all that stuff, and then when you don't have it, your brain just breaks. Download David. No, we want passwords.txt. Temp a file. Download passwords.txt.txt temp a file. Thank you. Target the file. Target does not exist. All right, we'll go back to the slides. Anyway. So the next module is we're going to be working more with Metinterpreter. Yep, wrong folder. Or no, did I think I did the shell wrong. Ha. I probably did a reverse TCP shell, not a Metinterpreter shell. That was in the slides, right? So you can get kind of like the Netcat basic functionality with a reverse shell by just running the Metasploit has a built-in module. It just gives you a command shell if you want something a little bit more simple than Meterpreter. Yeah, so here I use the reverse TCP shell. So I think in this next step we're going to use payload Meterpreter. No, it was a Meterpreter shell. I think all right, whatever. Talked about sessions. So once you've got a Meterpreter shell on the system and you've got it dialed back, you should see the Meterpreter prompt, which that dropped me down to a command prompt. So we'll take a look at that in a minute once we go through the slides. You can run the get system command, and from that'll get you information on what the system is and how it works. And here's kind of the example. It kind of gives you an idea of what type of privilege escalation you could do, because you're going to be stuck at whatever privileges you have of the executable on the machine as it's running. And so the get system will kind of tell you, like, hey, maybe we can interpret if we can get to higher execution. My module 3. Thanks, yeah. So let's go ahead and take a look at Meterpreter basics. So for this module, we're going to jump out of the slides and kind of go look at offensive security. A lot of this stuff, if you want to try it out for yourself, a lot of it's just basically going through the offensive security Metasploit Unleashed training. It gives you kind of a overview. So we'll go through this. So we have the help command of Meterpreter, and let's go back to our Kali Linux image and see. I wonder why that gave me a reverse shell. Let's try it again. Oh, oops. Gave me a reverse shell. Okay. I am going to rebuild the binary because I did something wrong. Interpreter reverse shell. Yeah, I probably just pulled the wrong thing. So let's try this one. Name that test exe. Start up Msfconsole, get the multi-handler working again. See if we can get into a Meterpreter shell. Anyway, while that's going, let's talk about the Meterpreter commands. So we have help. Basically, shows you all the commands you can run. Background. Background allows you to background your current Meterpreter session and then go back down into your multi-handler on Kali. Cat will let you cat out files. You can take a look at files, look at the present working directory that you're working in. Clear EV with Meterpreter. It will clear all of the application logs, clear all the settings and everything. Download, we've tried playing around with that. I wonder if the prompt is different, because it did have that download. Edit, we can edit files. So as you can see, like with Meterpreter, I didn't have to have Vim, I didn't have to have wget, I didn't have to have all this stuff. I just have this one piece of malware that's packaged, it's all ready to go, it's in a binary. And then with Meterpreter, if I wanted to execute a command shell, I can do that. Get the UID, dump hashes. If you wanted to dump the system hashes and see if you can try and crack them, you can use Meterpreter to dump that. idle time, ipconfig, directory, ls. And so this command is really cool, the migrate command. So you can actually migrate from your David Hasselhoff exe into other DLLs. So at this point, you can jump off of your jump point where you built with your exe and get into other systems using Meterpreter. So if we were in procmon here, and someone were to kill that David Hasselhoff exe, which I think is broken right now, yep. You can migrate to other systems, and so they're not dependent on that. You can migrate using that command. It's really easy to just get into other processes as long as they have the same runtime access as the user that's running. Multi-handler, set port. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there, and the payload, let's just take a look at the payload. So if I go to set payloads, freezes a lot. So let's go read the documentation. So there's all kinds of payloads that you can set. One of them is So one of them is just like a basic TCP reverse shell that just gives you a command prompt. So that's one reverse shell that you can put in there as a binary payload. Another one that you can put in there is the actual Meterpreter, and I think I might have copied the wrong one and put the command prompt instead of Meterpreter. But we'll see. Does that make sense? That answer your question? What? Okay. For some reason, swear. Why did it start on the wrong IP address? So that's why you want to specify the IP address and port, because it'll pick the defaults. If not, let's see if that bounced over. Still not. Try the Hasselhoff again. All right, yeah, okay. So there's the interpreter shell. Help. ls, present working directory. So now we're in Metasploit. We can go around and play with some of these commands. So I guess I did it right. I don't know what I was doing before. Download. Pass. Yeah, okay. So that command, you just type download the file. We can look at the file that was on the other system. So we have this password file, and passwords I heart David. We can look at it. I'm just going to open up another terminal. And then there's our password file, I heart David. You can go through and search for documents. So if you wanted to search for specific, interesting files like password files or anything like that, you can start a shell. You can upload stuff. You can take webcam pictures. All kinds of cool stuff you can do. Yeah, there's no webcam, but take pictures of people, see what's going on. So let's see if we can migrate to a different executable. So I will start. So we have Notepad open, good. We will find the Notepad process. Maybe. All right, so we have Notepad, Notepad++. So migrate. So we have the PID. We want to migrate to 3904. Okay, cool. So I am no longer in the Hasselhoff exe. I think it's still running. Or did it close? So it must have closed. So anyway, as long as I keep this process open, this exe notepad. If I close it, I should lose my shell. I'm still in there. Do we go to Notepad or Notepad Plus? Yeah, Notepad Plus Plus. We went from 7704 to 3904. Notepad is still running, which is this process. One of these. So I can close that, close that. And I should lose my shell. Nope, still there. Who am I, PID? Get you on the host. That's what I want. Username, hackbox. It told me before earlier when I migrated, I'm 3904. So we should be able to find that on the Windows box. Anyway, you guys kind of get the point, right? So I migrated in a different process. We can see that the David Hasselhoff execute is gone. I'm in just a different system. If the process, whatever I migrated to, dies, I'm going to lose my connection. For some reason, I thought I migrated to Notepad, but I guess I didn't. See if I can migrate to Firefox. Could I migrate to SCV host? Yes, but it usually requires a privilege escalation. We could try it. That's a good one. So one of the reasons why you want to migrate to SCV host is because SCV host spawns a lot of processes, and it's loading and doing all this stuff, and it's kind of a place to hide, and no one's going to mess with stuff. Yeah, it's always open. There's always a bunch of them open, and you never know what's going on with it. So let's try migrating. Yeah, so I don't have the privileges. If I was running as higher level privileges or system privileges, then I can get into Java's host, but with or service host. Without that, I can't. So I can only migrate at this level to any process that the user has open. Google Crash Handler looks like a good one. Yeah, so the question was, the exploit that I run determines the user level. The person or the account that runs the executable determines the permission level. So because this is a user that ran it, I don't have access to it. Let's try, I'm going to exit, close it. If I ran it as administrator, I should have more privileges. But I think at this point I can get to system from the admin. I'll try. But I think I have to go from admin to system, then to Java's host. or service host. Get rid of you. SVC, that's what I was doing. Okay, so yeah, there's a million of them. Get UID. Let's see if my migrate to 7084. Might do it. Okay. So yeah, see, I ran as admin. I was able to migrate to that. And at that point, I'm pretty much invisible to the system or anybody, unless you really go through with a fine-tooth comb. The biggest giveaway on this is the fact that you're going to see this SCV host with a TCP connection back to some strange IP address. But other than that, it's pretty just stuck in there. If we go here to the offensive security, and we go down to post module reference, we'll talk a little bit about persistence. Post manage modules. Maintaining access, persistent backdoors, interpreter service. So let's take a look at persistence here. So basically what's going to happen if the user reboots their system or turns it off, we're going to lose our interpreter shell and we have to get the shell back. So there's no amount of persistence there. So we can use Meterpreter to set persistence, which you can have it set up like a Netcat shell or have it install and run persistently every time it boots. Yes, there's probably a way to do that if you can get some way to get the program to execute with higher privileges. So if there's somewhere in the startup command that you can specify, I think that's pretty much locked down. I haven't played with it a whole bunch, but in the startup commands, if you can figure out where to put it, so we'll talk a little bit about privilege escalation in the next module. But basically, if you can find some way to get the system to execute it with higher privileges, either as the admin user or the system user, then you'll get Meterpreter at a root level. If you have it executing, and most of the stuff you can do as a user is going to be at the user level, unless it asks you to type in a password or something like that. That's not what I wanted. So here, in this example from offensive security, they're going to do the run persistence module, and they're going to say, I want to have the Meterpreter dial back to my multi-handler every 5 seconds on port 443 to this IP address. So this is some way you can get the interpreter shell back into the system through these commands here. Go through and test it. So I'm going to skip over that for now. So let's talk about privilege escalation. Basically, privilege escalation is finding some way of exploiting the system so that we can get root level or administrative level privileges and then get access to the full system and own the system as an administrator. There are modules in Metasploit to do this. You can go through and find UAC modules and go through them. We'll go through here and take a look at this one. So let's try the UAC bypass. Or no, let's see, we're already at root on here, so I'm going to leave this. Run. So we will type use Windows local bypass. Use exploit Windows. Windows local. Use exploit Windows local bypass UAC. So yeah, the easy way to do privilege escalation in the past was to just do get system. And basically what that tries to do is if you're running as admin, you can type get system and it'll move you from the admin user to the system user. Which the system user is really where you want to be because it has the least amount of restrictions. Windows local extensions. Okay, so I got to do this in Metasploit. That was my problem. I was doing it in Interpreter. So I'm going to type background, and so that's going to drop my shell. So my shell is still going. So if I do sessions-i, it should show me, or sessions-si is how I just type sessions. Yeah, type sessions. That'll tell me all my different sessions. If I do sessions-i, and then the number, that'll take me back. So I can go to background. Now I'm back at Metasploit. So let's try using this UAC bypass. So use exploit Windows local bypass UAC. There we go. Then we're going to do set session 3 because that's what our session is. And then just exploit it. Yep, so it's not vulnerable. That sucks. So then you could try the bypass injection, all kinds of stuff here. Here's a bunch of other stuff you guys can try. It's a pretty good tutorial just for getting your feet wet on here. Another way you can try is using this escalation method. And so basically Windows services are a good way to gain the extra privilege, because sometimes when someone will set up a Windows service, they'll give it just full access. So if you can find a vulnerable service and then inject your exe in there, or get some executable in there, you can use that to leverage to get to a system user when they restart or start the services. So if they reboot or something, the service comes up, it will execute the binary. So going back to the startup process, if you can find a service that has admin privileges, you can insert your exe into the command path there, get it to run your program instead of the service, and get privileges. So there's a whole lab here. It takes kind of a while to set up and get going and test, but that's something you guys can try later. So that covers module 4. Next we're going to talk a little bit about web shells. So I'm going to take a little bit of break. If you guys want to get water or move around, I think it's good to take breaks, so I'm going to do the same. Are there any questions right now? I know this is a lot to kind of ingest, and there's a lot of gotchas to it too. Okay, we will take a break.